Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Foundry Roundtable. And yes, it is actually episode 78 this time, despite what I said last week. But in any case, we are the podcast that exclusively covers the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I am your tame Foundry author, Drogon1791. With me is our resident rocket explosion expert, Greendragoon.
That rocket definitely exploded.
And a man who is a far, far better rapper than even Daniel Radcliffe, Markhawkman.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you over the music.
It happens. And we have two guests with us tonight. We have Jahmen1 and Odyssey47.
Greetings. Hello, everybody. Jahmen1 here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and obviously big news tonight is the 7th game of the World Series, and despite them actually being a Missouri team, I'm still going to have to support Kansas City. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's a sports thing, right?
I live in Missouri.
What sport are you talking about?
Baseball, man. Baseball.
Oh yeah, that game that Cisco was playing all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
It's Star Trek related. Right?
I always root for the Rays.
I can only root for the London Kings.
I only follow water polos.
I've been getting back into the old NHL on the computer. That's pretty fun. That's how I learned about hockey initially.
Well, you know, I suppose as Star Trek fans, since San Francisco is sort of the mecca of Star Trek in the canon, we probably ought to all root for the Giants, but, you know, you got to go with the home team, or at least close enough.
I live in Missouri, and I'm going for the Giants.
Well, I'm in Arkansas, and we
I
don't
always
have
go
a
against home team.
here. At least for the, Major League Baseball, anyways.
Well, anyway, on to Foundry News. In the Tribble patch notes from last week, so it's probably likely to go live on Thursday, there was a bug fix, which is they've resolved an issue that caused the Mirror Universe portal to be invisible.
Yes, this is one of those big old Master Foundry bug list bugs.
Yeah. It's nice to cross some of those off, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they'll probably need to update that.
And actually, there was a good interview this week on Priority 1 with ZeroniousRex, and she talked about several Foundry-related things. One of the first things that cropped up to me is that she is actually the person in charge of the Foundry, and I did not know that. It makes sense, but I didn't know that specifically.
Well, I mean, I guess apparently it dates back to her being a tester, and she was one of the big testers when the Foundry was like in early development, I guess.
Yeah. And she told the whole story, I think, and I don't remember all of it exactly, but she's in charge of several different teams as well as just the Foundry itself. It's sort of her baby,
Well,
she likes to say.
Well, she's awesome, so hey.
Now, as if we needed any more reason to refer to Zero as our hero.
Well, I think she said it best when she said, "You can pry the Foundry out of my cold, dead fingers."
It's good news for us, I think. But she told an interesting story, and they were talking about complications from bug fixes and unintended consequences, and she told a story where, based on a request from a player, she changed a vase from being in the Buildings tab to in the Details tab. But unfortunately, that broke a bunch of missions, since you had all of these different missions that were referring back to this object in the Buildings tab, which was then no longer there. So it kind of showcases two things. It says bug fixes are not always as easy as people think they are. And even if you can figure out how to replicate the bug and how to fix the bug, fixing it can sometimes break something else.
Yeah, and it definitely highlights kind of one of the big challenges of development for the Foundry, is because there is all of this legacy that comes along with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as the devs found out with the Romulan statue incident, you can't ever remove an asset from the Foundry because someone, somewhere, has found a use for it, and you'll break their mission if you take it out.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in the Romulan statue incident, they changed the size of the statue, not removing it. but it had the same general effect.
Yeah, it definitely messed with one of my missions. But it's essentially, I think, a good example of chaos theory, where the more complex a system is, the more can go wrong with it, the more unstable it is.
And the more even the smallest change can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Let's see. What are some of the other things that she mentioned? She mentioned that she and Bordicus have been talking about adding boss mobs to the Foundry. She didn't give a lot of details, but I imagine there are a lot of things that you really have to think about before you just add them.
She actually did talk about the fact that how with a lot of the bosses apparently in STO are very heavily scripted. So, like for instance, the example she gave was Donatra in what is it, Kitamura Accord Space. How there's all of these scripts that revolve around how Donatra interacts in that fight. How when certain things happen, when the health gets so long, and every once in a while she has to cloak, and then she has to uncloak and do her Thaleron burst. And all of this stuff is all scripted and like intricate. So it's not like they can pull Donatra out and stick it in the Foundry without just having her fall apart. So she kind of talked about some of the challenges of finding like bosses that Cryptic has made that doesn't have all of this elaborate scripting. And
I suppose another example would be the ISS Sato from the Mirror Universe Incursion mission. I mean, it has abilities that are actually, it's not actually using a buff power. It's using a scripted event to do stuff.
yeah,
But you compare that to the ISS O'Brien, which is, it's also a Dreadnought level Mirror Universe mob that it's not part of the Mirror Universe event, and it's a boss mob from a story mission.
I think that may be part of the way around it, is to just get some of those that are, just make some dedicated Dreadnought mobs, which is definitely something that we've wanted for a while.
yeah.
Or if we could set the health or something, that way we're not one-shotting the main villain or something like that. If we could just get a mob that has a higher level of health, that way the battle goes on a bit longer.
Well, I mean, if you were to use the ISS O'Brien, that would give you an enemy with something like 200,000 hit points, if not more.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some trickiness to it.
And I'm sure there's probably some mobs here and there that, are bosses, but maybe are not scripted as heavily as some of the others, and just have their own innate powers more. I don't know.
Yeah, well, one that I would definitely expect to not be on the list is the ship that Cooper uses in that one mission. Yeah, that I'm not really even sure you can consider that a ship, more of as a terrain object you can shoot at.
Now, one thing I think you could add pretty easily would be the planet killers from the Undine Battle Zone. Because those seem to be these fairly self-contained mobs.
But aren't those designed to be taken down from like 20 people?
Yeah, I mean, that's
like
one of the things. I mentioned there'd be some things to think about, and obviously balancing is, and those things, they scale, essentially, based on how many people are around.
We have the planet killer contacts in the Foundry.
Yeah, we already have the NPCs.
Yeah, but I mean, for all we know, because that scaling is a little strange. It's not like a normal mission.
No.
So for all we know, that may be scripting that's tied in that could totally screw up if they tried to pull it out.
And it may not scale well down to one person either, for all I know. I mean, I don't think I've ever tried to take it down with one person. I mean, if I'm sitting around one and there's just me there, I usually go try and find the other ones see if there's people there.
I think it might be more beneficial to just kind of try to put together a group of mobs that is, like you say, made out of a Dreadnought. It would be nice if what might really work really well is right now, at least in space, the mob scale based on how many people by adding in or swapping out different NPCs. So maybe what they could do is like have like 5 versions of the same Dreadnought that just progressively get more or have higher stats.
And based on how many people are in your group. That determines which one spawns.
Yeah. So you have 5 versions, but you only ever have one that spawns, and it just gets that
That'd be a good
more.
idea.
Now, as far as I know, nothing like this exists in the game, so it would have to be assembled by someone, which is adding work. I don't know if that's something Zero could do, or if she would have to go and get one of the I don't know, programmers or whoever design people.
It doesn't sound too complicated, but it also doesn't sound particularly simple either.
Yeah, it depends entirely on, because I mean I don't know that they have a specific stuff. I know there's a couple of like single player missions that have boss fights. I don't know how exactly those work.
Just make all your bosses reskinned Vodwar, since they're the toughest villains now.
I don't know how they compare to
that. Yeah. I haven't fought the Foundry version, but I can only assume that it's fairly the same as the in-game version.
I tested it a little bit before I was on Tribble.
And I think the Captain Vodwar on the ground are all parasite-ridden, and they fight like the parasite guys in the missions.
Well, that sounds entertaining, to be sure.
I'm gonna have to do some testing on that, because
they jump around and
should be boss fights that need to be more difficult. So one of the other things that she talked about was porting features over to Neverwinter. She described this as non-trivial, but she did call it, which makes sense. But she called it because the code is actually different between the two. But she called it a pet project that is something that they do want to do and keep thinking about, and they do even have some time scheduled to at least look at it.
Yeah, this kind of goes along with what Taco was kind of mentioning last week,
and posted about on the forums today.
Yeah,
that he does actually have some Foundry time scheduled, even though he's not going to actually use it for Foundry stuff. At least not all.
Yeah, he said he had to use a portion of it for Club 47, which we are all in support of.
Seems to be.
Yeah, it was really awesome,
especially if we get it in the Foundry after he's done with it.
Yeah, that would.
He said he would do that as soon as his Club 47 was finished.
But anyway, the point I was going back to is just the kind of, I'm really excited to hear that apparently it's come down from D'Angelo to try and squeeze in a little Foundry time.
Yeah.
That was really exciting news. Yeah.
And I mean, we said this kind of when D'Angelo first took over as EP. He's a systems guy. I mean, he's going to be all about like improving the various systems. And so far, we've already gone through a number of existing systems, and they've been revamped and whatnot. Maybe he's kind of starting to turn his attention back to the Foundry.
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
As long as we can try and convince him. Which of the devs was it that fixed the Ice Caves glitch?
We don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I know it was a programming issue.
I mean, I'm talking about the one where it was sized wrong. I seem to remember that one of the guys who is now one of the higher ups had to work on it himself because the other people didn't really know what was wrong with it.
Wasn't Jay Heinig, was it?
No, this wouldn't be. Jesse's a... No, I don't think so. I don't think we ever knew exactly who it was.
We often don't.
We just heard that it was a programming-related bug, and it was a very deep one, and problematic to track down. And that's mostly just according to what Cryptic Frost told us.
Yeah.
Yeah, with D'Angelo making that sort of push towards supporting the Foundry, and you were saying he's a systems guy. I think that's one thing this game could really have a lot of fun with, is developing new systems. Like we were seeing in the Delta Rising, where the ships were being disabled and stalling in space as we were destroying them, and that'd be pretty cool to see a lot more of that kind of stuff coming through. And with all the environmental stuff that's gone into the Foundry, there's a lot of fun stuff to explore in there with figuring out new systems. I was playing around with the flight mechanism and dropping mines up from a distance, for instance, and spawning drones and watching them all go along the ground floor. It's pretty neat stuff to be able to play with.
Speaking of volumes,
well, one of the things that got sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that got mentioned in that thread today was the possibility of getting a damaging floor volume effect.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that thread, actually. I can't remember who made it originally, but they posted, just sort of some ideas for other volumes that we could get. Let me go find that thread. Oh,
I'm excited to
Pax
hear.
Federetica.
I'm excited to hear that Captain Only is a volume.
Yeah, it's that volume that they use on Nimbus 3, where you go into the city and it despawns your away team, which seems like that'd be perfect for us, because, you could put it over a whole map or not, as you wanted.
Yeah, part of the map you can have your away team, and then the other part not.
Wow, that's so good. So many missions where the captain spawns in a tight space and all of you just crowded by your away team there. That'd be great for immersion. Great.
Yeah, I mean, especially for missions where you go to meet an admiral in his ready room, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have your 4 bridge officers accompanying you to talk to the admiral in person.
Or if you go on a date, it's kind of weird.
Yep, exactly. Don't need that many chaperones. Thank you very much. So let's see. Taco kind of came in and was talking to us about some of these things, like like a black and white effect. Now, is that something that we've seen in game somewhere? Because I didn't think
I have seen it in Champions.
In Champions, okay.
And I thought someone said that it showed up somewhere in Stowe. But I can't recall where.
In Stowe, the game uses a black and white effect under certain circumstances. I think, like if you're...
is that like when you're incapacitated? Or when you're...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it's not something that they use as a general map-wide effect.
Yeah, because that's not something that anybody else can see when you're near death.
I know people want to do Captain Proton stories. I've seen.
I'm sure, yeah. So let's see, what are some of the others that we mentioned? The triolic wave effect, which essentially turns everything blue.
Well, we already have that as a backdrop.
I think we have that as an FX thing, right?
I want to say it's a backdrop. It's a backdrop.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was the one where it was like flickering on and off from the Davidian missions.
Yeah.
That's not quite the same,
where
though,
you could
because
do it
it
on
doesn't
cue.
do that thing where it makes your character turn transparent, does it?
No, it probably wouldn't.
No, this is different from the... basically it's...
I think that thing that you see on
through
Drozana Station every so often.
Yeah. Like
everything will turn blue. But obviously the advantage to having some of these things as volumes or something like that is that you can trigger them on and off.
Yeah.
Where you can't do that with backdrops currently. Cryptic can do that with backdrops. We can't. Let's see. Melee only volume, which obviously they have used that at least a couple of times, like on Coliseum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
But who knows how that was done?
Gozer. Maybe only Gozer.
That may actually predate
one
Taco
observation
the Stowe team. I don't know.
One observation I've made about the game in general is that maps always have a set of variables which determines what abilities are allowed to be used on the map. And but that is not a map-wide thing, as people have noted several times, but it's actually, I don't know if it's a volume effect or if Gozer had some trick for changing the map settings based on a mission trigger.
It's got to be a
they may have done it different ways on different maps at different times during the development of the game, because you have different people working on it. They might do different things differently. Wow, that was a lot of use of the word different in one sentence, wasn't it?
Yeah, on this show, we're different.
It was different.
Yeah.
Well, having the ability to sort of just jump in, having the ability to change the backgrounds. I was just messing with that in a mission I was playing Memory Alexandria. That I was trying to create a transition, nice smooth transition from one solar system to another, and I set everything up, got everything ready to go. And the only thing I couldn't switch was the background, and one had a green background, one had a black background, and so eventually I had to split the maps in two and have an app transition in there. It could have been a nice smooth warp in.
Yeah, a number of us have done ones like that, and you kind of have to pick a very generic Starfield backdrop and just leave it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It'd be nice to be able to switch backdrops. Mm. So let's see, what else do you talk about? High gravity, which is...
One thing I wanted to say about the backdrop thing quick, though, is that Cryptic doesn't do that in most missions. Because if I remember right, I can only think of one specific mission where I've actually seen that. So that might be one of those things that Zeronious... Yeah.
They actually do it a lot. We just don't notice because, for instance, the what is it? The tutorial, the Fed tutorial, does it all the time. Except you don't notice it because it's disguised as a map transition.
Okay, so we have breaking news. Sorry to break in, but we have breaking news. Something that just got pushed live or pushed in the patch notes here. Talaxians are going to be a playable species.
For lifetimers only.
For lifetime accounts only.
Cool.
This is retroactive to anyone who's purchased a lifetime subscription. It says, they're now playable species for Federation and Klingon factions, not Romulans. That's odd.
Interesting. Might be a typo.
Yeah. So I wonder if they'll put if that means the character species will be available in the Foundry character creator.
That's what I figured. If you're a lifetimer, we do often
get the things that are sort of default. They're the things that are available at the very beginning. We get those automatically.
Possible.
It's very interesting. And there's another 800-day veteran award as well. A free ship upgrade token, 1 per account.
I remember this kind of leaked out on Tribble.
Yeah, did see that, but I just thought I'd break in with that because that's kind of cool. Even though I currently, me, I love alts, but I currently don't have any free character slots, so I may not do that one.
I thought that was an appropriate usage. Sorry. I thought that was an appropriate usage of a gift there.
Sure.
Throwing get an upgrade, take your favorite ship, upgrade it, jump back in the game, kind of thing. That's pretty good.
All right, so back to what we were talking about, volumes. We talked about a few others. So we've got a high gravity volume, which is essentially, like in Boldly They Rode, where you can't jump, essentially, and you just sort of have to hop between the little pylons.
I would describe it as walk slowly.
Yeah.
Because you can't run either.
He said he didn't remember how the one in Boldly They Rode actually worked, so he didn't know if it was...
One downside to that, though, is I seem to remember those pylons being the only thing that made Boldly They Rode manageable.
Yes. So we would need access to those, I think.
Depending on how those work. They might be
they appear to be coded as an enemy of some sort, just an enemy that you can't shoot at. And that you can target them normally, you just can't shoot at them. And apparently the only skill you can use related to them is the thrust button.
Yeah.
Which doesn't work with anything else.
So with the gravity and floater volumes, I notice your floater, you can only excuse me, you can only fly jump hop, and you you always get brought back down to the ground. So if you really need to be able to have a low gravity floater, I don't know if that works, or are they one and the same?
Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, when you put a floater volume down, you should be able to go anywhere in 3 dimensions.
Well, that's what I was trying, yeah.
There's only one map that Cryptic has made that uses the zero gravity version of floater physics, and that doesn't actually require you to use a floater. So there's no telling how that effect would work if we
I tested the floater volume, and essentially what I did was I took an interior map, I put 2 platforms and floater volumes in between them, and then published it and got on a floater guy, or a guy with a floater, and went between both platforms, and it worked fine.
Oh yeah, it works. It's tons of fun. I've been blasting around in there. Yeah, it's good times. You can make some really fun stuff.
Absolutely.
I take a moment here to plug something that I've been messing around with. I just published it today. It's still really rough, but feel free to go fly around in there. I called it Le Loco Bouche de Paradiso. So look up Loco in review or Paradiso or something, and it's just a bunch of maps where I just kind of went freestyle, and you just fly from objective to objective, and it's a fun little event, fun little float. It takes about 10 minutes, but yeah, you can really sort of get the idea of how much fun we can have with those things. But you were saying about the zero gravity, yeah, because we had that one mission where, and the Dyson Sphere area where we had the zero, the zero gravity. That would be really fun to be able to play with. I'd like to have that volume.
One thought that occurred to me after playing that mission a dozen or so times is that we only actually have 5 directional buttons in Stowe, whereas in Champions they have 6. There is no button for descent in Stowe, which makes using the zero gravity floater stuff a bit less fun.
Yeah, it makes it non-intuitive, because when you press back, all of a sudden your character sort of does this weird kind of motion that you're not really expecting. Whereas if you had a dedicated positive Z and negative Z, that would be pretty good.
That would be great. That would be great to have in conjunction with the water assets, because it'd be a lot more like swimming.
Yeah. And it does translate very well into ship thrusters. Just saying. All
right, so the next one he talked about was hoverboards. Apparently, hoverboards are problematic because it's sort of super specialized. Essentially, they don't actually run on water; they run on a terrain thing that's under the water. So, in order to have, I'm reading here from what he posted. So, in order for them to display at the right height, the terrain below the water has to be set at a very specific depth, and it all has to be flat. So maybe if we could get that object.
Myself, because prior to them turning on the Risa event, I noticed that the ramps and stuff were visible on the map. So I had one of my characters run the course in their frosted boots, and I noticed that the water has a pretty consistent knee-deep height going around the entire track, which is unlike the old Risa, where you would actually find water above your head, but the old Risa doesn't do hoverboards.
Yeah, they obviously built the new Risa specifically for that. Well, or rebuilt it, I should say, because of course it was built the year before, and hoverboards were only introduced during this year's.
I want to say that the old Risa map was retrofitted to hoverboards, although our version does not.
I'm not certain about that.
I seem to remember testing that in both.
I remember that it was
I know you can use swimwear on it.
Allow swimsuits, but I don't remember hoverboard.
Now, does this mean that the hoverboards are not going to be rideable in open space? I always figured we would use the hoverboards in conjunction with the jetpacks and get some kind of motion going that way. Just saying.
Well, you know, I think if we could get whatever this object, this terrain that allows them at a certain height above it,
yeah.
You know, if we could get that as an object, then there you go. You can put it anywhere.
Yeah,
just have it be like an invisible floor that just allows hoverboards on top of it.
I guess I didn't mean in space. I meant on ground maps, but being able to take them up into an air float, like a floater volume, but with your surfboard on, basically.
Well, I think they built them so obviously that they go a certain height above this terrain. Because they didn't want them to go up. They wanted it to be sort of a two-dimensional thing.
Yeah. 3D, the world's 3D, man.
Yeah. Let's see. Next was swimsuits. He says he thinks this is a map variable and not something that can be put on a volume.
Which our Horizon map does, in fact, allow.
Yes, it does.
Swimwear.
Let's see. We also have demon class planets. This essentially, like Nukara, to make that environment, which isn't really too different from the space volume that we have now, other than it sets you on fire before it kills you.
Yeah. If
you don't have an environmental suit. Obviously, if we did have that, it'd be good to have Tholians that were out of their suits.
Yep.
Let's see, a rebreather volume, which would require you to wear the rebreathers you get from the one Romulan Arc mission.
Or a spacesuit, either one.
Or a spacesuit. Because I don't know, can
wow, this is going to be fun.
Players of other factions get those rebreathers?
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't think so either.
But yeah,
but you can use a full EV suit for anything that the rebreather will do.
Yeah,
the only thing with the rebreather is it lets you use normal armor instead of a spacesuit.
Yeah. And then the other one was lava. So, something that this would be like a surface on the ground that you couldn't touch without getting hurt.
Which would be kind of
obviously,
nice because,
yeah, something we've wanted for a long time.
None of our fire causes damage.
Cryptic, on the other hand, does actually have several fire props that will damage the player. We don't.
That'd be great to have environmental damaging effects.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Ooh, I just thought of another one that wasn't mentioned, but would actually be really, really awesome to have. Have any of you played Hive Ground?
No. What's that?
I'll take that. No.
I don't think so.
Okay,
you're
into
talking
the
about
Hive
those
Ground.
electrical things?
Yes. It'll have this section of the floor light up with this big purple X or something, and then a second later, anyone in that zone gets zapped. That would be fun to have as a Foundry thing, but I'm not sure how much scripting would be required to make it work. But in the vein of damaging ground things, it's something that popped into my head.
Does it actually kill you?
It can. It does a certain amount of damage to you when it zaps you. I'm not sure if that damage is high enough that you can't survive it ever, but I don't remember ever surviving it.
I have a feeling that might be tricky for us to implement with what we have. Because I think in scenarios where we'd want to do it, we would only want to temporarily stun the player, and how do we switch it on and off and stuff like that.
Do we have a low area of effect damage? That, for instance, if you were underwater, you would be getting slow amounts of damage as opposed to just a bam.
Well, I mean, at the moment we don't have any way to cause damage at all.
Well, we can do the environmental effect where the player chokes out and passes out.
Well, okay, yeah. Besides that,
that's what I mean.
But no, we that's the only one we have, and it kills you pretty quick.
Yeah. So when you're drowning, you don't drown right away. You sort of drown.
There's a volume in what is it? The Halloween mission, Hearts and Minds, where you have to break into the base, and there's a gas flooding at the time. So
I'd actually think that's the same effect used for the Romulan missions where you can't breathe the air.
Yeah, but the Romulan one doesn't actually kill you. It just kind of stuns you for a sec every once in a while.
Because I've done those ones without.
Actually, you know what? I just thought of something. The one in Hearts and Minds doesn't kill you directly either.
It does. It will eventually. Because I remember going through that and having to.
It's something I tried out with my engineers and medics. If you have something like a medic generator or medic nanites, you can actually stand there and have it heal you enough to offset the health draining effect, and it'll wear off eventually.
So there is something like that.
So I think that the Hearts and Minds thing is actually I guess the best way to put it is the game applies a dot to you, and either the dot kills you or it goes away.
That could be.
Well, I'd say there's definitely a lot of different volumes that we could think of for them to add, and some that are already available in game that they could just port over, or new stuff. And I think Taco said something about he's kind of keeping lists of these things that for possible when he has time later that he can do them.
Does anyone ever have that much time?
You were talking about new stuff and saying D'Angelo's a system mechanics guy, and I wonder what floats in the back of his brain when he plays the game. I wonder what he kind of would like to see fleshed out a bit more in terms of how the game operates, with volumes and that sort of thing.
I imagine they've got, over at the BioWare in Star Wars: The Old Republic, they call it a wall of crazy, where it's all of the things that they would love to do someday go on that wall, and obviously sometimes they they'll never get to it, but sometimes okay, we got some time, let's do this off the wall of crazy.
To the wall, to the wall.
Well, one thing that occurred to me relatively recently is that, one, Taco used to be an environmental artist in Champions Online, and two, a lot of the plants that we see on the really weird stuff in Stowe look very similar to certain things in Champions Online.
I don't think they share assets if that's what you mean.
Well, it looks like
stylistically, though, he might be drawing some inspiration.
No, I'm talking about there are actually certain things that look like they were directly copied from one game to the other.
Yeah, I don't think even the textures are at the same quality between the two games.
Maybe not, but it's looks like at least some assets occasionally get ported from each other.
With infinite diversity comes infinite possibilities. Maybe some of the 1940s or 50s style buildings that are in the Champions asset list would be fun for us to play with to create 1940s World War II missions or something like that.
Unfortunately, everything in Champions has a heavily cartoony style to it. You would notice that it would look really out of place if you tried to put it in. So.
Have you seen the Gadroon ship props in Champions? Those, well, they don't look like Star Trek ships, but I'm not sure I would call them cartoony either.
I'd call them cartoony.
I think there's enough things in Star Trek Online itself that aren't in the Foundry that will last us many, many, many rounds of Taco putting them in. So.
Yeah, good point. We still don't have the Romulan interiors or the Selene interiors.
Well,
or the
Alachi, take a lot
or the Hirogen.
Longer. But even just objects, there's lots of objects and so that can be put in before we even get to champs. So.
If we ever get a...
Which of course brings me to something I was thinking about discussing. Well, look around the room and like, hey, I want that. I mean, there's all sorts of props in this room alone that would be awesome to have, like this spinning orb thingy that I'm staring at.
Should mention we are in the Delta Quadrant Command Center in the Jahmen1 Dyson Sphere. And yes, there are a lot of objects that we'd love to have. Just as we were looking around the Kobali battle zone last time, obviously there's just tons of objects in this one room that would be awesome to have in the Foundry.
Very funky purple lights up there. Would be kind of fun.
Well, I mean, if we ever got the soul on the interiors, I'd love to have a mission set on one of the Dyson destroyers.
Well, I'd like to do something in the Dyson Sphere itself in space, and I think just the easy way to do that is just put in some of the backdrops. Taco once told me that'd be a fairly easy thing to do, but you never know what fairly easy means.
Something I really should ask him when I get a chance is how complex it is to add new Foundry doors.
And that's something he may not know how to. Well, as I think about it, he may know how to do that because he put the doors in on new ESD.
Did he, or did someone else do that after he created the map?
It's a good question.
He talked about it a lot, so I assume he knows how to do it.
Yeah, I assume he knows how to do doors because obviously we could use some new doors. In some of the Dyson interiors, in the Delta Quadrant, in Taudewa space.
The DS9 wormhole. DS9
that'd be good.
Now that I think about it, Taco didn't actually create new doors. He simply translocated the existing doors.
I don't know, but I mean, there's definitely quite a few sectors that never got Foundry doors. I mean, we got Taudewa, we've got the Solar Sphere, we've got the Delta Quadrant.
The interior of the Romulan-only social zone, none of those had sound.
Yeah.
Oh, there may be a concern about level restrictions. But then again, we've got Foundry doors on New Romulus, which is 50 only.
Yes. Well, I think it's something we should ask him. We'll see what he says. Yeah. But why don't we move on to what we've been working on? We've been talking about Foundry news this whole time, so let's talk about what we've been working on. Dragoon, why don't we start with you?
So I may or may not have started to experiment with things for Part 3. Specifically, I've actually been trying to create a very normal-looking Federation ship interior, kind of taking advantage of all the carpet assets and whatnot. See if I can create a reasonable facsimile. I've kind of got some plans for how the climax of the story goes, and I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to be able to do everything I want on a stock map. There's just too many transitions I want to do, and I want to do some special thing, like a thing where you have a choice about how you proceed with consequences for whichever way you choose. But it's something that it requires that you go to 2 possible different locations, which definitely moves into the realm of custom work. So really, I mean, a lot of what I've been doing is kind of playing around trying to see how much can I make a custom Federation interior look like a stock Federation interior.
So essentially what you're going to have to do, which is something you haven't done for a mission before, is build a sky castle.
I've been still experimenting with the black space, and we've had pretty good success with that. So don't think I'll need to do a sky castle, or at least not one in the sky. In the black space of an interior, it kind of still counts as what I would call a sky castle. Oh, well, then in that case, the 4 interior from Part 2 counts.
Sky Castle, Void Castle, same thing, really.
Void Castle.
The Eidolon core from Part 2 was a Void Castle.
Ah, okay. I was wondering because there were a couple parts of it that almost looked like a stock map using those generic walls.
Yeah.
But I guess not.
mean, how in the world would I fit that giant core into any stock map?
Oh, I don't know. The more I think about it, it's like, I don't think so.
No, I mean,
but that's good because the more you get working on part 3, the more I won't have to make fun of you for that coming soon remark.
Oh, I'm sure I've got months and months, if not years, of that to look forward to.
So, have you gotten much plays on part 2? I mean, I know the Foundry's only been up for a short while here.
I was gonna say, I mean, well, the problem is
and actually, reviews aren't on, are they?
I was at 17 before the Foundry went down for Delta Rising, and so it hasn't moved since then.
17's pretty. 17's pretty good because
it's better than most of my missions.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully getting it out of review was enough that it started to get plays from people finishing up part 1 and then searching for part 2.
I suppose we should ask, and we should have asked earlier, but has now that the Foundry is up, because it wasn't actually up last time we talked, has anybody seen any issues that would prevent reviewing from being turned back on?
I haven't seen it.
I don't think I have.
There was a.
I seem to remember someone mentioning an issue with some maps needing their waypoints fixed, but other than that, and a few things where props got moved for no obvious reason.
Yeah, I
remember Casmodian saying something about that.
I think Casmodian's issue was an older one. There's a previous update that caused that. It wasn't specifically Delta Rising. And he's just kind of stuck with it because it's a Spotlight.
I know he's wanted to update his Spotlight for a long time. There might be some issues with that.
The only thing I heard about was like a weird shadow on a couple of the ZeroniousRex Federation interiors.
Yeah.
But nothing that would really prevent play. I don't know. I mean, I don't think if they turned on reviews that they would face any particularly catastrophic problems.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know right now, there isn't any outstanding issues.
Yeah, that shadow thing is simply a variation of an old issue because I remember some of the maps had wonky shadowing before, particularly the interior cave style maps, because sometimes when in the cave maps you'll wander off into this corner or this one particular hallway and it'll be like almost completely dark when the rest of the map isn't.
All right. Let's see. Mark, have you been working in the Foundry since it came back up?
No, haven't managed to find time for that yet. Maybe this evening. I don't know.
All right. Jahmen, I think you talked a little bit about what you've been doing, which is messing with volumes.
Yeah, I guess I jumped the gun there.
That's all right.
Talked about the local bouche de Paradiso.
What does that mean in English?
I mixed French and Spanish for this title. And so you have bouche, which means mouth, loco, which means crazy, and Paradiso, well, let's go with paradise. So that's how that one came around. The crazy mouth of paradise. That's the translation. Yeah. So I've been messing around with that last 3 days. That was just inspiration with the floaters coming into our grasp. The real thing I've been working on is a title called Mela of Tholia, and I'm using the Doff Mela as my primary, well, really the primary character. You're the secondary, kind of going along with her adventure, and you go with her to explore the crystal fields of Ikari Epsilon. Well, the Ikari Epsilon or Ikari Beta, I haven't decided yet. But and while you're down there, an adventure takes place. While you're exploring the crystal fields and learning about the crystals down there and meeting a few new races, a little adventure takes place. So, yeah, I've been playing with that. That's been a long time second to Photons of Possibility, and it's kind of that put together nicely and make a good story out of it. So eventually that'll come out. I'm hoping that'll be the next 2 weeks. That'll drop into reality. But we'll see. We will see.
All right. Odyssey47, what are you working on lately?
Well, I am still working on my 3-part reimagining of the Federation tutorial.
Now, is this based
tell
on the
tell
old
us.
tutorial or the
Yeah.
new one?
Are you still there? Did we lose Odyssey47?
I think we lost.
Yeah,
him.
I'm
Oops,
seeing
we
a little.
lost him off the call.
Little glitch.
Yeah.
I can throw something in with the local Busta Paradiso there. That I said earlier. That was a floater mission, and it's just for fun. So don't take it too seriously. It's just going from point A to B and having some nice maps around you. So.
Okay, well, while we try to get Odyssey47 back, I was in the Foundry for a little bit this week. I started to lay some maps down for my Herogen missions. The very first one is going to be this camp that you are at, because it's this is somebody telling you the story in first person, and so you're going to be a young hunter initiate, and you're going to be at this camp. This sort of I figure that every so often when they have young hunters to train and evaluate, they set up a temporary camp on a world where they can go and hunt things and see how they do. So you're going to be on this snowy alpine world in this camp, and they're going to give you some challenges to do, and you're going to go out and hunt some dangerous animals and bring back some trophies and try and catch the eye of one of the alphas that is around, so you can get posted to a ship.
So it sounds a lot like the Yachtja, except that unlike the Yachtja, you probably have a higher survival rate here.
Yes. Well, you're going to lose some of your other hunters along the way. Some dangerous animals. And so you'll eventually you'll catch the eye of an alpha, and he'll bring you onto his ship. And then what you're going to do is he's going to say, okay, we've got we discovered some sensor readings of a ship that we haven't seen before. We're going to go hunt this. Obviously, I want to test your skills, so you get to, you have the helm, and tracking these guys is up to you, so let's show off your skills. And they're going to turn out to be Kobali. Apparently, this group of hunters hasn't encountered them before. And so you're going to track them to a jungle world, and you're going to study them, and then that's about as far as I've gotten. What eventually is going to happen in this mission is that you're going to conflict with this alpha over the best, what to do next. And eventually you're going to challenge him for leadership and take over the ship. And become the alpha.
Well, that's
sort of that Klingon promotion method.
The basic thing makes a lot of sense to me, because the Herogen are known for being nomadic. They're not known for being talkative.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see a whole lot of reason to expect the Herogen to share information about potential prey with other Herogen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you would find pockets of Herogen that would not know the things that the other pockets would.
I mean,
Tribes,
I can imagine them trading information back and forth, but I wouldn't expect them to, automatically tell everyone else everything.
Yeah.
I've got the perfect title for you. You should call it the Alpha of the Delta.
There you go. This is essentially going to be, I've mapped this out into 4 parts, essentially telling the story of why there are Herogen ships running around, with people made up as Herogen, as player characters. So eventually you're going to, in the other parts, you're going to, keep inexorably moving towards the Alpha Quadrant, or really the Beta Quadrant, technically, where eventually you're going to discover Sela while she was in exile, and she's going to bring you in and turn you to her nefarious purposes, and then, of course, betray you, because that's what she does. And that's how you end up working with the Alpha Quadrant powers.
Well, be careful for a multi-part series. They can consume your life.
Well, I've done them before, and unlike some people, I've actually completed them.
Yeah, I've never published a part 2 myself.
Have you published a part 1?
I really should get that 5-part series back up and remastered.
A good story takes its time.
It does.
Well, but that's Legacy was something that where I thought out the first part of the mission, and then I was kind of like, I'll figure out how I'm going to do the second part after I publish the first part. And then at the second part, I'm like, I don't know.
I think it's kind of tougher when you haven't mapped out all the parts. I think it goes a little faster when you know from the beginning what each part is going to be.
Yeah, makes sense. Have a basic goal vision, I know this mission is going to end kind of around this story point, this plot point.
I actually planned out the end of the mission. I planned out the basic, overall goal. I mean, because, a Klingon is going into the past to change the past and future and whatever, and your goal is to hunt him down and kill him. But the problem was I didn't really figure out the exact mechanics of it because, the first thing I did is that in the first part of the mission, it has you going into the past, talking to the Romulans that he's in the process of attempting to subjugate, and you fight your way to his base where he's currently headquartered, and then I just kind of broke it off there, and now when I look at it, it's like, okay, so what am I going to do other than having you walk from the door of the base to hit the, command center in his base? And then just kind of sat there and scratched my head, like, I don't know. I mean, because, the basic story gist of it is you go through the base to find the gadget that he used to come back in the past, destroy it, and take him out. And that's the end of the mission, which, when you describe it that way, sounds like would take all of one, maybe two maps. Which is, of course, the reason why I haven't finished this, because I haven't figured out a way to, shall we say, make it interesting.
That
Aside
can
from
be
the
a sticking
story.
point.
Well, you're kind of hitting on something that I'm playing with, and that is density of content. What you're trying to tell. I'm actually messing with this with my story right now. What you're trying to tell the player, and the amount of. I mean, we don't have time. We have events that space out what we are telling them. So, how much information can you give them in a certain number of events, and what events in between that information or dialogue makes it feel like there's space where they can reabsorb the next bit of the story, and creating that flow where people still stay energized by the end of your mission. So especially if you have 2-part or 3-part where you want the person to feel energized by the time they're done absorbing this story, which, I haven't really ever seen any bad stories, really. It's just a matter of presenting them in a way where people can absorb it. So it's so they can stay energized for that 2 or 3-part, or play that 4-part story that you're doing. And so, putting that content in there, figuring out, how much dialogue can a person's brain flash capture, absorb, and then what to put in between. That's my main question. Well, I'm sort of repeating myself, but what is that content in between that makes the person feel like, okay, now I'm recharged and I can absorb something new? Comments? Help.
It's a challenge, for sure. One of the things I found in my 5-part series is that there were some places in the middle where it lagged a lot. And that's something that I'm going to be touching up, especially there's a big dialogue scene in part 4 of mine where you essentially, it does sort of rehash a lot of the plot points.
Which you got to do.
Yeah, what you got to do, remind people of where they've been. Because you never know how long ago they played it.
And they didn't sit there and think about the story and write it 17 times, and they're just kind of blazing through, absorbing little bits of whatever, and maybe they get 70% of your story. So
absolutely,
I assume that someone's going to get maybe 50%, and then if they play it again, so I try to repeat stuff lots. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think there's probably, as I go back and look at it, there's definitely some room to trim it, though, for sure.
Yeah, and that's something that as authors we often should be looking at is how we can streamline the story. Because I mean, it's very easy to overdo our stories and add in all of these extra points that really don't add anything to the core plot.
And to sort of second on that a bit, where we are playing this game because we like being in this kind of environment and having I'm not trying to actually rush out of the game. Believe it or not, if I want to be in this environment. I like it here. So creating the stories and the activities for people to do in this environment. It's just a matter of, I think, presenting stuff in a proper flow.
But you also got to make sure that you keep it interesting, and you can do that even in just your writing with making sure that it's the dialogue is snappy and energetic and things like that. And there's a very good mission that we've talked about many times called Shore Leave Under Siege, which is very, very dialogue heavy. But I mean, throughout the whole thing, I was never once looking at my watch going, God, how long have I been in here?
Yeah, that was a really good mission. I like that one.
Yeah, it's just because it was so good. The dialogue was so good. And,
Sorry, what was it called again?
Shore Leave Under Siege by Johnny Snowball. It's one that I think ought to be put up for Spotlight.
So what is it exactly that he seemed to do there? If you guys have played it,
You know what? I think it's part of it because he had interesting characters that you liked and that you got involved with.
So character connection.
Character connection is a big one.
Not a bunch of dry expositional dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had lots of optional skippable dialogue as well. That I think that tends to help.
Yes.
And if it's good enough, it's well enough written, you don't want to skip it. But having the option is nice.
A lot of the time with exposition, you'll tend to drift into writing out a backstory that the audience may or may not care about.
Yeah, and only if you got a backstory, and this is something that he did, only reveal it when it's absolutely necessary. And there's a great character that he has in that story that you only start to figure out about them at the end.
Or you can, as an optional or alternate method of handling that, you can make the backstory an Easter egg, especially if it's something that really doesn't, what's the word for it? It's not necessary for understanding the mission.
I think one of the things that Pax Frederatica did that we kind of showed a little bit of on when we played through his mission is at the very end of his series, he called it an epilogue scene, or an after credits scene like they do on the Marvel movies these days, where he had all the characters around there, and you could actually talk to them and find some more details that weren't necessarily necessary to the story, but if you wanted to know them, that's how you put them in there, and they were there for you.
One thing I would advise people not to do is not to make the same mistake I made with Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, and making it so that the Easter eggs are things that people have to intentionally hunt down in order to find. Because I actually stuck in several Easter eggs that give you additional information about what's going on in that, you don't need them to understand the story because they're kind of sort of like a side thing. But there was this thing you could do to find out the name of the planet that the mission ends on by, going around and scanning things. Not that anyone ever did that.
You don't know. There could have been some dedicated folks.
Nobody ever told you that they did that.
Yeah.
Well, what you would have to do is that you would have to go out in the middle of this water area that you otherwise had no reason to go to, and scan this bunch of fish that are swimming around in the water. And then your science officer would make a remark about how the DNA of the fish is similar to Vorta DNA. And the obvious implication here is that the Vorta originated on this planet.
For the true explorer.
Sometimes it's a lot of fun to put those things in, though. You never know if anybody will get it, but somebody might.
The other one I did in that mission was a sort of an optional dialogue puzzle where you had to talk to 2 or 3 NPCs, and then after you did that, once you got to the 3rd NPC, this extra dialogue thing would open up, and you would get a bunch of expositional stuff about one of the characters, which, kind of sort of explains why she's sort of an angry Vorta and not quite as honey smooth as most Vorta usually are, and why she likes to punch people in the face rather than try to talk nicely to them. But, again, it's one of those things where in order to ever see that, you have to talk to not one, but several characters that you don't actually need to talk to for any other reason.
Well, another fun thing about those Easter eggs is that you can explore with types of storytelling and levels of what's the word I'm going to look for? Lightness that you wouldn't normally put into your epic tale, of your epic 7-part tale. It's kind of fun that way. That was some really interesting data when that hit me about the fish and the genes and the DNA and the board. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Well, also the one thing with the one Vorta, though, is that you find out that there's a reason why the founders haven't, replaced her with a clone of her that doesn't have Borg cybernetics, and that's because they can't. They don't actually know where she came from. They found her in the wreckage of a Jem'Hadar ship, but and she acts like a normal loyal Vorta, except that she's unusually mean, and much like a Jem'Hadar, when she has problems with people, she tends to punch them in the face or shoot them, and doesn't talk to them about
punch in the face.
So, forgot to mention that Odyssey47 has rejoined us. And we were going to ask him for some more details about this revamp of the Fed tutorial that he's working on.
Well, I actually started it before the last one came out, so that required me to change quite a bit of it. But I kind of combined elements from part 1 and or the original and the new one. And I've got like a whole season, you could say, of stories planned out. So
cool.
So I'm kind of using it as an origin story.
The old one was in an odd way interwoven with the Borg STFs, and part of the STFs don't make a whole lot of sense without it.
Well, when I first started it, the way I was doing it focused a lot on the Kittimer, and then when they redid the tutorial, you don't even go to the Kittimer anymore, so that just really screwed a lot of things up for me. But so it's caused me to have to redo quite a bit of it.
Right on, man. That's great. I always wanted to throw some time into some, tutorial-based beginner level content, cadet level content like that. 'Cause it's so much fun from the ground
one thing
up.
that I've been working on, not heavily, mind you, and I'm not sure what faction I'm going to publish it under, is a purely social map where you're given a guided tour of the old Clonus ground. Does the Great Hall interior.
Since it's pretty much not in game anywhere else.
Well, actually, I don't. Okay.
So maybe one story mission from
there are 1 or 2 of the old Klingon story missions where you go through a similar interior, but I don't think it's ever referred to as the Great Hall.
No, it's actually referred to as the High Command.
No, no.
Something like that.
The building itself was called the Great Hall because it's not where it's where the warriors congregate, not where the leaders congregate. That would be the High Command or whatever.
In any case, I definitely don't mind seeing some elements brought in from some of the old cryptic content that isn't there anymore, because I actually kind of liked the old Fed tutorial parts of it anyway.
I forgot something that I probably should have mentioned earlier. This one has Klingon versions of the Thunder Cougar Falcon Bird.
Really?
Well, you remember how in the old ESD shipyard, the original one that they had at launch, they had those consoles where you could go through and cycle through holograms of just the ships at a specific tier.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that meant that there were several of those consoles lined along the walls. Well, in the current Foundry version, when you look at those, you'll see all of the 3 or 4 ship models superimposed on top of each other, much like the Thunder Cougar Falcon Bird, except with only 3 or 4 models and not a dozen or 20 or something. In the Klingon Great Hall map, it actually had the equivalent of the shipyard as a wing of the Great Hall. So when you walk into this wing, you'll see Klingon versions of that.
Very cool. Let's see. Let's move on, because one of the things we wanted to do tonight was do a review of, how we do for featured episodes in the past. We wanted to do a review for some of the cryptic missions in Delta Rising. So, starting tonight with Mindscape.
And a word of caution, we'll probably be spoiling things, so
yes,
if you haven't played Mindscape yet, why not?
It is the very first mission that you can play at level 50. So there's almost no excuse for anyone not to have played it at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't know, who would like to start? The basic plot of this mission is that you, through a mind meld, you go into Tuvok's mind and help him free himself from Cooper's influence, which he still had from the previous mission.
Well, actually, I'm not sure you're freeing him from Cooper's influence as much as you are backtracking a telepathic link to hunt down Cooper and kill him.
Well, yeah, but
that's part of it, for sure.
Abate his telepathic assault, as Tuvok describes it.
Yeah, okay, that works.
Symbolically, you go into his mind, which of course is the interior of Voyager, which is kind of a nod to the... you remember the one with Bashir where the interior of his mind is Deep Space Nine?
Yeah,
kind of a nod to that episode.
That said, they do a lot of fun things with it to personify the fact that this is a abstract place.
Mm-hmm. One of the funny things is you almost get all of, through these projections in his mind, you almost get all of the famous voice actors they got right away in the first mission.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was really interesting is that when you're talking to Tuvok about the various, I guess you could say, figments of his imagination that you might possibly be able to use as an ally, he mentions pretty much everyone that you saw him mind meld with in Voyager, including Lon Suter. Which, if people aren't familiar with Voyager, Lon Suter was one of the Maquis, who was a betazoid who would, well, let's just say he was nuts because of the fact that he was a betazoid that wasn't a telepath.
And he's the actor who voiced Chucky the Killer Doll.
and Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings.
No kidding. What a great actor and what a great character.
He's been in all kinds of things.
Well, the scene where Lon Suter died really made me wish he didn't die.
Oh yeah, I thought he was a great character and a really interesting element that they don't almost allow in the Star Trek crew, whereas this very on the edge brilliant, unstable guy.
I wouldn't describe Lon Suter as brilliant, but he was pretty smart, yeah.
Yeah.
So Suter's in Mindscape?
No,
He's
not in
mentioned.
Mindscape.
He's
You don't
mentioned.
see him.
Wow, okay.
Tuvok talks about him when he's explaining to you what 7 of 9 is going to be there for, because he's talking about the various people that he mind melded with that might be able to be found in his mindscape to use as an ally against Cooper. And he mentions on Suter, not that you actually see him. I just thought it was a great touchstone, simply because
There's lots of great touchstones in that episode. I love when you first meet 7 of 9. She's like, of course, which is projection of 7 of 9. But anyway, she's still like, why am I in quarters? Why am I not in my regeneration thing?
Hey, Akko. I don't know. Maybe they didn't have a model.
I don't think I had anything negative to say about that mission, honestly. It was really, I mean, I really am thinking about what I didn't like about that. It was really well done. It felt like Star Trek. It felt like Tuvok was this 300 or 400-year-old Vulcan giving this really solid advice and direction. The character, the voice acting was great. And the solutions to the problems and the solutions to the problems were just that felt like a really smart Star Trek diplomatic solution set. It was just great. I mean, people have said that already, but I really enjoyed it. I was really happy to see them changing the direction and finding those kinds of solutions. It makes it so much more interesting sci-fi. It's so easy to blow stuff up, you know.
Are you referring to the solution that they find at the end?
Well, yeah, just the way he tracks Cooper and the way they eventually start to get into cooperation with the Undine, you know, and that peace and bond starts to form a little bit, and it's like, hey, why are we fighting? Right.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, a little bit of spoilers. I mean, yeah, mind melding with the bioship was definitely an incredibly Star Trek solution to the situation.
Oh, it was awesome. It was just awesome. I loved it. While that was going on, I was just loving it. I was like, yes. Opens up so much more about the Undine and the way their telepathy works and the way their systems work and how the ships are living ships and integrated. And it's just great stuff.
It also clarified the relationship between the Undine and the Iconians, which was something that you don't necessarily look at it the first time, but when you look at it the second time, you're like, wait a second, because I mean, the bioship pretty much says like, okay, yes, Cooper knew that, and he talked us into doing it anyways.
Well, you gotta remember this goes back to the revamped Undine missions from over in Gamma Orionis and whatever that sector block right next to it is. Where basically you find out that the Iconians have basically created like fake Federation and Klingon ships to convince the Undine that the Federation have invaded fluidic space. I don't know.
Right,
I mean,
but,
I don't know if it's kind of like kept very hazy as to what Cooper's relationship was, but it kind of almost implies that there was something more to why Cooper was pushing so hard.
What I got out of it was that as a group, the Undine are aware of the fact that it was a false flag op, and they know that it wasn't really the Federation and the Klingon Empire attacking them. It's just that, to a certain extent, they don't care.
I don't know. I don't know. One of the things kind of interesting about this mission was it's actually trying to achieve a lot of different things within a single mission. I mean, first off, it's trying to be the final wrap-up for the arc we started back in Step Between the Stars. So, in a way, it's kind of a part 3. But but it's also kind of it's kind of our opportunity to go back and see Voyager as it was, versus dealing with the newer Voyager and the older cast now. Because everyone we deal with, if in Tuvok's mind, is the age they would have been during the show. So in a lot of ways, it's dealing with the crew on that terms. In a way, it's kind of a good way to kind of ease us into the Delta Quadrant as kind of a recap of where we've been, sort of a thing.
So, what did you guys think of the maps?
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
My favorite one is the Voyager map, simply because of the fact that every time you complete a quest objective, the map changes around you. I mean, there's one point where you walk down a hall. There is nothing there except the turbolift door and the other end of the hall. You walk down to the end of the hall, so something happens. Then you turn around and there's this hallway jutting off to the side that wasn't there before. And that just keeps happening over and over. It was awesome.
What'd you think of the fake hallway where you walk up to it and it's just an image?
That was a neat optical illusion.
Force perspective image. That was pretty awesome.
I later realized that was actually the environmental artists showing off what they do to make it look like their other things in the game are bigger than they really are, because you don't normally notice when they do this trick, but it's not something that they did just for this mission. It's the only time in a mission where you get to look at it up close.
Something that was commented on, I want to say on Twitter, is that it seems very much like something a Foundry author would do, with playing around with triggers and having hallways swap out while the players not.
I think there seems like more than a couple times where maybe they've taken a few inspirations from things that we do.
I seem to remember that there are certain players, Kirksplat, who like to make sky castles that change their architecture. Heck, Drogon did it once, so
Yeah, I thought everybody had to do it last time on the show, or not last time, but 2 episodes ago.
Well, I meant in your Tholian Foundry Challenge entry.
That one as well, yeah. But I mean, what I loved about it is that even when they were doing these tricks around you, the map was still just like frighteningly accurate to what was on screen in Voyager. So much fun to be on that interior, because I do love Voyager. Not everybody does. I understand that, but I love Voyager, and the Intrepid class was a great design, and it was great interior sets, and obviously brought back a lot of fun memories from Elite Force for me.
Another really fun thing with the mission is that in all of the combat, or space combat scenarios, I should say, you get to fight alongside Voyager. I mean, because when I had to do that thing where you disable Undine's or Cooper's bioship, I actually more or less had Tuvok keep the little ships that it kept spitting out distracted while I shot at the bioship directly.
And the bioship interior was pretty interesting too. I mean, it was not a large map, but it's very cool looking.
Yes, very well done map.
Very cool. The creepiness of the Undine falling upon you. It's Halloween, Getting there.
Gotta milk that for all it's worth.
That was really cool. I wonder if we'll get anything like that.
I don't know. I don't know enough about how that works to even guess as to whether that could be put into the Foundry.
Some kind of dropping animation or something, maybe.
It's a special spawn animation, I think.
Yeah,
because
I think
if you look really closely,
they're not targetable as they run along the ceiling, I think.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I noticed about it is that they're actually standing upside down when you first see them.
I think might be some like complex pathing going on there too.
Maybe. Maybe it's like the warp, or not warp out, but impulse out for the ships, where they just do a little loop there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those effects that they've only used since surface tension, so we don't have a ton of really have a ton of idea about how they do it.
You also see it in the Undine incursion mission, or infiltration. Sorry, the one where you beam down to Bayshore and start going around looking for Undine that are pretending to be Bajorans.
Yeah, but that came out along with surface tension.
True, but you can actually get a pretty good look at how that effect works, because a lot of the Undine do that in the part where you're walking through the tunnels.
So anything else that people wanted to pull out about the mission?
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I was disappointed that you couldn't go in the conference room, but then in another mission later on you can.
Yes.
And Tumor Boy has said that this will eventually be available as a player ship interior. So I imagine you'll have to pay for it.
And in the Foundry, I hope.
It would be nice to have in Foundry.
It would be nice. He said it gets complicated because all of the ship interiors all share one map. At least
They put the Defiant interior in there in the original series.
Well, see,
I think they must have built some
that.
specially built maps.
Yeah.
For
one thing Tumor
those two
Boy
interiors.
has mentioned is that if they're creating something to make it a player ship interior, they can basically make the map itself, then save a copy of the map, and make one copy into a player ship interior and the other copy into a Foundry asset. And that's a lot quicker and easier than taking an existing interior and then retrofitting it into a Foundry asset.
Well, it's not something I would expect to see anytime soon. And obviously, they got to make it into that player ship interior first. Personally, I'm going to definitely, be switching over to an Intrepid the instant it does come out. All right, let's see.
Just to take advantage of the interior.
Absolutely.
Man, with the Voyager interior being so nice, what a perfect opportunity to start integrating the interior again. The interiors of ships really haven't had a lot of love with any of the new sort of updates since a long time, since almost free to play. I always thought it'd be really neat to have, for instance, the research tab active. Able to activate your research tabs down by the science center. And maybe even some of your fabrication or crafting stuff in the engineering section, for instance, that kind of thing.
Well, of course, it used to be you had to go to Memory Alpha to actually use those. So I mean,
right.
Now that they opened it up, you can use it wherever.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, but there could be, I don't know, maybe some bonus things for doing it in your interior or something.
Well, that's what they did originally to kind of get people to go down and use their ship interiors a bit more, as they offered options that were only available in those areas, which I really like. I thought that was a really good way to do it. Use them, don't use them, but hey, there's for going down into your ship, and anything I think we can do to start just sort of feeling out how to use the interior of the ship more. I try to integrate it into my gameplay. I kind of give myself little game rules where it's like, I can't access this tab. I actually have to go to place X in my ship, and then I can use it. I kind of give myself that, but you can do that at your own discretion, which is the great use of the tabs. But it'd be fun to have some of those actually built into the game, and see what we actually start using the bridges for.
I think the ship interiors are kind of another system that's a victim of its own legacy, because there are so many ship interiors that it makes making even the smallest change incredibly complicated.
Right, because you have to do it on each one.
Yeah, so I would love to see them like really do something special with the interiors, like actual shipboard missions or more complex systems, that sort of thing. But every time I kind of play out this thought, it always comes back to the fact that, well, what do you do with the multitude of bridges that there are, half of which don't have interiors, and all of this legacy and whatnot. And the only solution I can ever come up with is to throw it out, restart.
Well, this brings up an interesting point someone mentioned about the Romulan interiors, is that the Romulan ship interior is, as far as the geometry of the interior goes, a full ship interior. Except that other than the captain's ready room, nothing that you would see in a Federation or Klingon interior exists. None of the NPC contacts, none of the trophy case things. There are places where you can go around in the interior and see where these things, it looks like whoever designed the interior left spaces for them to go, but they're not there.
I'm guessing they just ran out of time and couldn't work everything out. Like I said,
I don't think it was a matter of running out of time, because one of the devs in one of the threads about this mentioned something or other about how certain aspects of that were just, I guess the best way to put it would be insanely complicated to code, and the people who did the original work for it, didn't leave instructions on how to recreate it.
Yeah, it's a system that's a victim of its own legacy. So, I know, like I said,
I think I've heard a few times people talk about a ship interior revamp, and I think even Taco posted in a thread today about it, that it was maybe I think it's on their wall of crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon, but it is something that has been considered.
Well, on the wall of crazy, I think the big, let's call the wall of dreams. How about the wall of dreams? On the wall of dreams, you could have, I think big on people's list is having an interior, or having a map, space sector map, sitting on your bridge, looking at a space sector map. You get to still pilot your space sector icon while sitting on your bridge. I mean, wall of dreams.
That's been on the wall of crazy since I started playing the game.
Since launch.
I actually had a thought, believe it or not, about how to do this, and it would require a dual login, I think, where you would have a ground character and a space character, and somehow you'd have to link them.
I think the simple way to do it would be to essentially it like teleports your character or something. Your exit door moves to where you wanted the ship to go, and it gives you, like a relative.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Okay, so you click on your helm console, you get an interface that shows you all of the available destinations. You click on one, it teleports you there, and on your view screen you see warp stars for an appropriate length of time.
Yep.
And then when you hit leave bridge, you're there. It teleports you there.
Pretty snazzy. You did think about it. Nice one.
Seems like a simple way to do it.
I like your idea better.
I'm going to bet you there's absolutely nothing simple about it.
Yeah, whenever anybody says, "Oh, well, that'll be easy,"
no, it's programming.
Immediately distrust them.
Well, one thing that occurs to me about this is that the reason why they haven't done this yet is that it would require completely sidestepping the way movement in the game works.
Yeah.
It's true.
Because, it still has to obey the rules of the cryptic engine, and that would most likely
I'm sure it breaks
the rules of the cryptic engine.
I'm sure it does. But, as players, we don't have to worry about that, do we? It's cryptic
because it's not going to happen.
I think you got a pretty good one there, though.
This is our own wall of crazy that we're doing here.
Yeah.
I would love to see missions that take advantage of player ship interiors, even if it isn't specific Like it's like a section of the ship that you don't see. But they would almost have to do something like where they can swap out like walls and whatnot. So if you have ship X or ship class of X or group, or then you have this style of wall. But if you have like interior style Y, then it looks like this. It's the same layout and everything is in the same place, but it just.
But just the art style is different.
Interesting. This general line of discussion reminds me of something that was proposed a long time ago, and that was to add a Foundry contact door, for lack of a better term, that corresponds to the player's holodeck inside their ship. We have to go to your bridge and find the door for your holodeck, and then enter the holodeck in your ship. But obviously, there's a reason why that's on the wall of crazy.
Because not every ship has interiors. Some of them just have bridges.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if you just had something where it's like, every bridge there was a door that was, the one Foundry door.
Every single bridge in the game has at least one door, hatch, or something that looks like it leads off the bridge.
Yeah.
And even bridges that don't really have an interior where you can walk to the holodeck, you can at the very least, walk to a door and access that as a substitute for actually walking all the way to the holodeck.
Yeah.
I mean,
or anywhere else in the ship.
Like with the Scimitar interior, you don't have any in the bridge itself visible, but if you walk around to the backside of the Thaleron chamber, there's a turbo lift door there. It doesn't go anywhere, but it's there.
I wonder if they could ever adapt the Neverwinter's room technology.
What do they do there?
Basically, all of the rooms are laid out in a sort of grid system, but there are a multitude of different options for like rooms and corridors.
And you simply drag them and drop them in whatever configuration you want. You can pair this particular hallway with this particular room.
It's in some ways similar to the way they have the pre-made building complexes in Stowe. It's just that it's an interior thing where, it's walls and the floor and not just a group of assets.
Is it map transitioning you between the two rooms? Or
No. There are no map.
You essentially build your whole map out of these sort of like Lego pieces where each piece is a room.
Yeah.
It's quite a neat system.
Oh, maybe I'll go check it out just to see
to
see what they're doing.
But I'm sure Zero would tell you it's non-trivial to bring that up.
I need a stronger word than non-trivial.
It has been suggested at many points in the Foundry's history that we should have some sort of method of creating true custom interior maps. Currently, as an interim measure, Taco has suggested giving players the ability to use a giant empty cube as an interior map and building with that,
that was
because
something
in
that
this
was on our
case
map
there would
poll.
be no existing geometry whatsoever.
No, I mean, the big problem with Neverwinter's interior, even if they could port over the tech easily, they would still have a huge problem of creating assets for it. Because none of Stowe's assets were designed to be built on that grid system. They all have to be a certain size and have special tech for swapping out walls and creating doors and stuff like that.
Need to be a literal grid.
It does,
because
Neverwinter's tech.
Again, it doesn't need to be a literal grid because, you just take a room, you take a hallway, and then let the player match them up with each other.
Yeah, which is
so what they would essentially need to do is add whole rooms as assets, like we have the transporter room. If we had more like that, we could mix and match.
Yeah. Another example would be the way the pipe assets work.
Oh,
If
I
you have
see.
Snap to
Yeah.
Grid turned on, you can just set the pipe assets out and they'll line up perfectly.
Okay. Gotcha.
As long as the hallways are the right size for the grid.
Yeah.
Well, obviously,
for
but
the Snap to Grid, because we already essentially have a grid on there with Snap to Grid. It's not a visible grid exactly, but
That's certainly a thought. I mean, the one downside is we have to be careful about spawning those things on top of NPCs or the player because it'll push them out.
yeah, I mean,
but-
obviously you have that sort of thing in addition to what we already have, because you can't replace anything with this system because that would break many all of the existing missions.
I don't know, maybe more like hallway segments and whatnot could work.
Well, with all the blocks that we have now, you can really actually make quite a bit of stuff. It's pretty cool.
It would be cool if we could almost get another category for objects, like we have building categories on ground maps. That is just rooms.
That would be great.
part of what led me to this line of thought with building custom interiors in Stowe is making observations on the way Champions Online handles interior maps, because it doesn't give you the whole map all at once. When you are in a interior, you walk in, you can see a map of the room you're in, but when you leave the room, then you get a map of wherever you are after you left the room, and it kind of like fills it in a piece at a time. But the way it handles the pieces is, discrete chunks, like room, hallway, next hallway, etc.
Okay.
I don't think it's all that different than how Stowe handles it. I think it's more of just a display thing for the map. Although even Stowe has use of, I call them his regions, because of another game I know that called them that. But basically, it's a special like volume, you could call it, that basically says, okay, whenever you're in this particular volume, only display objects in this particular volume, and when they move into the next section, display those. And it's kind of a technique the renderer uses to kind of decide not to have to render this room over here where your player isn't, that sort of thing.
Game really is made of volumes.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
Stowe has that sort of thing that the map makers use because, well, if you've ever done one of those tricks with Acacian where you, shall we say, climb up on top of a building that the devs didn't want anyone to climb up on top of ever, you will start seeing stuff like that. It's like you walk across the top of the building and then suddenly your character disappears and you can't see yourself anymore.
Yeah, because
Or
you moved out of one of those
objects
regions.
here because the game decided to stop displaying them while you're standing in a certain spot.
Oh yeah, definitely the textures were made so that you are, they're made to face one or two directions. It doesn't take long flying around with a floater to recognize that, and then having to fill in the backs and sides of things. Can I jump back a topic? We were talking about the ship interiors there, and one thing that came to my mind was having, like we have, the research tab, instead of doing the contacts right in the ship, you could have a tab that maybe becomes active, or assignments become active as you go from room to room, and so instead of having to do each individual bridge, you could just do a tab UI system that activates when you're on your bridge or in those rooms. I don't know if that...
So essentially, you can walk into the room and start giving orders.
Right. And it's like you're just pulled up your data pad and you're going doop-a-doop-a-doo, right? And you're saying to everybody, you're interfacing your data pad with...
You, Lieutenant, you go work on this.
Right. Yeah, and you can't do it unless you're in the room because whatever, you need specialized equipment or interface or technology of some kind. But yeah, and maybe you could do it outside your room. You can, but again, not getting the bonuses or whatnot. But that would avoid having to go through each individual bridge map.
I think, unfortunately, that, any kind of interior revamp where they were going to, add more stuff, do more stuff with it, would take at least one season's worth of development.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. Well, I don't know. Who knows?
And we know the coming seasons, or we suspect the coming seasons anyway, are probably going to be very Delta Quadrant focused, and new featured episodes and things like that. But maybe after that is the time to do something like that.
Well, Wall of Dreams, right? And you never know. Sometimes something comes up.
Wall of Crazy
Dreams. Oh, that's an easy Wall of Crazy Dreams. I'll go with that. Something comes up. You're like, hey, I just throw this in there right now because it's not much effort. It's something we didn't see before or whatever.
Quickly becoming the Wall of Delusional Fantasy.
I think that was all I wanted to say about that. So we could segue back to the textures being all 3D and stuff.
Well, let's see here. We've got a few minutes left, so I wanted to ask. We actually were talking about this a little bit earlier, but there might be some more ideas on it. This is something that came up on the forums of ways to make non-combat missions exciting and interesting and engaging. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that? What we talked about earlier was essentially good characterization and characters that you want to interact with that are snappy dialogue and things like that. But what else? What else can you think of?
One thing I saw was... Oh, go ahead.
You go first.
Somebody start.
I was going to say, what a lot of people tend to forget is that there are several forms of conflict in storytelling. While the most common one we see is what's referred to as man versus man, where it's a physical battle between two people, or man versus groups of people. There are lots of other kinds of things. There are conflicts known as man versus society, or man versus nature, and all of these are kinds of conflicts that don't necessarily involve conflict that is shooting things, but can be things like just trying to survive in this environment, or survive a cataclysm, or even just an emotional or verbal battle.
That's a great way to break it down. Is that your opposition is many different, can be many different things.
Yeah.
I like what you said about a verbal battle. I mean, if you think about movies like Silence of the Lambs, I mean, the most exciting scenes in the movie are not the action scenes, they're the scenes with Clarice talking to Hannibal Lecter. It's a verbal battle.
Yes, because the trick to it is something has to be happening to give the player something to be focused on. You can't just have it so that, you're talking to somebody about trivia. It has to be a reason why you want to be talking to this person. I mean, because I actually do have one mission that got a reasonable number of plays that was largely a non-combat mission, with the only combat in the mission was something trivial, and honestly, I probably could have completely left it out and not noticed the difference, but whatever. Anyway, what I did was I created a mission where you're trying to... You're examining the inside of an alien ship of unknown origin and probably ancient age, where you wander around and you're trying to figure out several things. One thing is that, one, why was this ship adrift in space? Who built it? And stuff along those lines. And in order for this to be interesting, you have to be actually doing something and not just walking around and pushing buttons on consoles.
Say the player needs a problem to solve, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for my case, the first thing that I have the player do is try to figure out what powers the ship, because one of the things that you immediately notice when you when you enter is that there are these various things just sitting out in the middle of the floor where you would not normally expect a ship to be designed to have things sitting out in the middle of the floor.
So you're using kind of mystery as a hook.
Yes, I mean, I guess you could say it's a player versus environment sort of thing, where, you know, you're...
Player versus suspense?
That's another way, I suppose. Maybe
That's a way to put it.
You know, the first thing that you try to figure out is what happened to the well, okay, overall what you're trying to figure out is what happened to the ship, because, you know, you get on board the ship, the entire crew's dead, and the ship has been frozen through the dark void of space for well, people aren't sure how long. They just know that it's been several millennia. And you need to figure out, okay, what happened to the ship? Why is it here? And, of course, where did it come from? Because, let's face it, it's not that far from Federation territory, and it isn't, you know, a recognizable vessel.
So that's the intrigue. It's why are these guys here? They shouldn't be here.
And of course, you know, the one thing that you're trying to figure out eventually is what happened to the crew of the ship to prevent them from, you know, continuing to use the vessel. I mean, why are they all dead, more or less?
So a mystery is a good hook. I think another one is like an external threat of some kind. I mean, I'm thinking in my head like V'ger from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You know, that's largely you might call it a non-combat mission. You know, except for maybe the bits with the Klingons. But you know, that's one where there's sort of this external threat. You have to determine the nature of it and how to get it to resolve. And you can do that in a non-combat way.
So it sounds like you're saying a second party pressure. I was as
Sure.
we were discussing, I was sort of making a little mini list of, you know, what are the properties of combat that make it this super exciting thing? What are we trying to mimic or pull elements of in order to, you know, I was thinking, well, these are situations where you have high levels of attention, a life-critical situation possibly, or injury, you know, possible situations, so needed high-level attention. The second-party pressure.
Yeah, a ticking clock.
A ticking clock, you know, where it was something, adrenaline. Usually in these situations, there's some sort of excitement that goes along. Excitement's too broad of a word.
You think about the motion picture, and it was, you know, every so often they would say, okay, now we're this close to Earth. Now the entity is this close to Earth, and it would keep going on and on until it was actually at Earth. And you know, the threat was ever approaching.
In my mission, The Darkness Between the Stars, I created a bit of tension at one point in the mission by you find out what happened to the crew, and you have, you know, a few minutes to prevent it from happening to you too. Basically, what I did is that the ship uses a drive system that's kind of halfway between a Borg transwarp gate and a wormhole. But, well, the ship is in a dark matter nebula, and for some unknown reason, whenever this portal is open in a dark matter nebula, it causes the dark matter to emit harmful radiation. And basically, the ship got cooked, or crew of the ship rather, got cooked by radiation when they entered the dark matter nebula, because the portal gives off radiation in a dark matter nebula and not in normal space. And when you're poking around the ship, you accidentally turn the engine on.
Oh no!
So then you have
Accidents are a
to
good way.
collapse the portal before it cooks your ship too.
So circumstance.
Circumstance in changing the circumstance on the player very suddenly
Changing.
can make it exciting.
A former conflict I forgot to
Pull the
mention,
rug out of them.
and one that can be very interesting is, but trickier to pull off, is man versus himself, where you're dealing with the psychology of someone wrestling against their own mind.
Internal conflict. You have to have something broad enough that you think it'll clip with or catch with most people, that they would actually have an issue with it.
I've seen a few Foundry missions do this, and oftentimes what they'll do is they'll actually have another character who is the actual battle is between him and himself.
Voice it out that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that I've done in a mission of mine where, the central conflict is created because of somebody wrestling with something in themselves. And that causes problems for your player. Which is, it's a mission that's largely non-combat. It's not completely non-combat, but it's close.
And it's a great way not to derail. I think you mentioned that before. That it's a great way for you to experience the conflict and not have your character be the one who is in that situation.
If they don't logically have a reason to have that conflict, because there's another one that I was considering where it was going to be a multi-part series where the first one you're in a very traumatizing experience, or what would for pretty much anybody be a traumatizing experience, and then the next mission would sort of deal with that in the player character. You can't just invent that trauma for a player character. You have to actually put them through it first, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But another character, you could go ahead and invent that for them.
Using, to touch on the environment thing, I was thinking just to flesh out the idea of, the properties of combat and creating them in different ways. One property, let's say you had a cave system, characters going down a cave, and a phaser shot shoots at them. Well, the enjoyable part about that is the narrowly missing danger. So you can recreate that in any way. You could have a bat fly out at the character instead of a phaser. And you're actually essentially creating the same experience of excitement. So yeah, there's just different ways to do the same, to create the same kinds of, almost the same kind of content and the same kind of experience.
Yeah, and since we can trigger things on and off, there are ways to surprise the player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To literally or figuratively pull the rug out from under them. So we have reached our time limit for the evening. So, Dragoon, do you want to throw up our contact info?
Sure. You can be reached at email at foundryroundtable@live.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtable. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Markhawkman can be reached at MAR Hawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
Z, are either of you guys on Twitter?
Yeah, I've got Jahmen1 is on Twitter, so you can reach me Jahmen1 Twitter. Yeah, at Twitter.
And I'm Odyssey47, I think.
That's right. I think you followed me.
Because someone took my Odyssey47.
My in-game handle for, if you want to contact me in-game or look up any of my missions, is Heisenberg. So if you want to find any of my content, feel free, and love the feedback, folks. Thanks for everyone who's playing out there.
All right. Well, we will say goodnight for the evening. So good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.